The room was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint, joyful chatter filtering in from the living room. Mom stared at the empty red pouch in her hand, the crooked pencil letters blurring in front of her eyes. "Lily," she called out again, her voice cracking, stripped of its usual harshness. The lump under the thick blanket remained perfectly still. Mom scrambled to her feet, dropping the toy car and the red cloth. She reached out, her hands shaking violently, and grabbed the edge of the blanket. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, a sudden, terrifying dread gripping her chest. Then, she yanked the blanket back. I floated down a little closer from the ceiling, watching her face. I wished I could cover her eyes so she wouldn't have to see. My body was curled into a tight, small ball. My skin was a terrifying, mottled shade of blue and gray, my lips cracked and entirely devoid of color. My eyes were closed, my face frozen in a grimace of pain that had long since passed. A low, guttural sound escaped Mom's throat. It wasn't a scream, it was the sound of a soul shattering. She fell to her knees beside the bed, her hands hovering over my cold face, too terrified to touch it. "Ethan," she shrieked, the sound finally tearing loose, echoing through the house with such raw agony that the chatter in the living room stopped instantly. "Ethan, come here, Ethan." Dad burst into the room a second later, Grandpa and Grandma right behind him. "Sarah, what's?" Dad's voice trailed off as he saw what was on the bed. All the color drained from his face. He stumbled forward, pushing Mom aside, and grabbed my small, rigid shoulders. "Lily, Lily, baby, wake up," he pleaded, shaking me gently then harder. His fingers scrambled to my neck, searching for a pulse that had stopped beating 2 days ago. "No, no, no, no," Dad chanted, tears instantly spilling over his cheeks. He pulled my stiff body into his arms, burying his face in my hair. "Someone call an ambulance. Call 911. Grandma Smith let out a horrified gasp, covering her mouth with her hands as she collapsed against Grandpa. Leo stood in the doorway, clutching his new transformer, looking confused. "Why is Lily blue?" he asked innocently. Mom was hyperventilating on the floor, staring at the empty red pouch. "The locket," she gasped, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. She swallowed the gold locket. She wrote a note. Dad looked down at the red cloth she was holding. He read the crooked letters, "Mom and Dad, I'm sorry." He let out an agonizing, broken roar, clutching my body tighter to his chest. "What have we done?" he sobbed, rocking back and forth. "My baby girl. What did we do to you?" The paramedics arrived minutes later, their sirens wailing, but it was too late. They couldn't do anything for me. They gently pried me from Dad's arms, placing my small body in a dark bag. I watched from the ceiling as they carried me out. Dad tried to follow, but his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the front lawn, weeping into the dirt. Mom sat frozen on my bed, staring at the indentation my body had left on the mattress. She hadn't shed a single tear yet. The shock had completely paralyzed her mind. The police arrived shortly after. They cordoned off my room, asking questions that Dad was too broken to answer. When they asked Mom what happened, she just kept repeating, "She slept for 2 days." I thought she was faking. I told her she was a curse. The officers exchanged grim, pitying looks. The next few days were a blur of unimaginable grief for the family. The house that had been filled with birthday laughter was now suffocated by a deafening, crushing silence. They held my funeral on a rainy Tuesday. It was a small gathering. Mr. Peterson wasn't there. I heard he had packed his bags and moved out in the middle of the night the day after I died. Mom stood by the tiny white casket, looking like a ghost herself. She had lost so much weight in just a few days. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and gently touched the polished wood. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I was so angry, so scared for Leo. I forgot how to love you. Please, please come back. I'll be good. I promise I'll be a good mom." I floated beside her, reaching out to stroke her